All right, it's 1 o'clock on the nose, so we're going to dive right into this. Thank you all for spending your time to come in here, and I know we're getting like pretty far into the conference at this point. There's a few more breakout sessions left, but I'm glad you stopped by to listen to me go through this with you. One thing I wanted to point out too, like they gave us the slides to start with, and for all of you who just watched me do a similar presentation downstairs, like, sorry for the bad jokes, but I'm doubling down on them in this one. One cool thing though, like I have 2 daughters, and I'm glad to see grunge coming back because like they're cutting it close, and the current fashion trends are like not cool. Let's go back to the grunge thing. All right, but enough of that. An absolute beginner's guide to Habitat. All right, so about this talk. It's going to be an introduction. It's going to be like fundamentals though. So there are loads of talks out there. We've been sending people to conferences. We've been like they're on the Habitat website. You can find some on the Chef website, YouTube channel, all this stuff, and they're really great. The thing about Habitat though is it's pretty technical, and there's a lot of concepts to grasp because it's taking like maybe several things you're familiar with or might have somewhat similar solutions for, but it's all kind of tied together, and so people kind of have a difficult time coming in, just trying to figure out what it is. Those other talks are great, and you should check those out too, but I feel like, in my opinion, that's totally biased, is that this might be the missing Habitat talk, like the one that kind of gives you the, okay, I got a mental model now of like what this is you're talking about before you like get way into the weeds and things, because there's lots and lots of weeds. And so we're not going to get into the weeds in this talk though, by the way. We're not going to look under the hood. And we're not going to dive into the deep end, but it's cool. Like, I'm glad you all are here. Like, we're going to strut our stuff in the shallow waters of this pool, and it's going to be fine. That's where the swim bars are at anyway. So, like, we're going to build a mental model. I'm a UX person. This is a big thing that we always are thinking about. Like, how do people think about this in their head? Because it's like when people approach something new, like what they do is they just think about like, okay, it's like this other thing, or maybe it replaces this other thing, or I think or they might even use like other real-world objects that they're familiar with and just try and understand like what are they trying to tell me and what does it do, and you build that picture in your head. So like we're going to go heavy into that. We're going to use lots of pictures in this slideshow, and I feel sorry for the intern at the NSA that gets my search report next week because there's like lots of weird stuff came out looking through just for the slideshow, but that's okay. And then at the end, the last thing too, like. Again, this is the UFC kind of thing here. We're going to give you a clear path on how to get started. So this will be like laying a foundation. Then when you walk out of this room, you're going to feel good, like you can talk about it. You're going to know exactly where to go to find additional materials and like getting your hands on it and actually trying some things out. Okay, so I had a 50-50 shot of getting this slide right. And I swear yesterday the screen was on that side. I almost am certain it was. And then I was afraid that I was going to be pointing at like, insulting someone in the front, like, who the heck is this guy? And then they're like, that's why I never sit in the front row. I tried it once, and then this idiot put an arrow pointing at my face. So, it's right. It's pointing at me. And why I kind of like wanted to do this talk is like, so we spend a lot of time. So what you might first think, like, Chef has a UX team? Yes, we do. Like, small but mighty group. And why I wanted to do this in particular is like we've talked to a lot of people. Maybe some of you in here about. Like the website, the tutorials, and what do you think this is? What do you think it means? Like some pretty standard user testing stuff. And so there's been, like I think in the little over 2 years I've worked on this project, we've redesigned the website 4 times. Like because we're just trying to get the messaging right. We're trying to help people understand it. And then a side note to that is that the engineering team of this project is just like churning stuff out like crazy. So we've got to like constantly like try and tell that story again and like figure out different ways to think about it. So what this is like a lot of the learnings we've had, like where do people get confused or what doesn't make sense? And so what I wanted to do is just try and clear some of that stuff up for you. And so like when you do these talks, the first thing they ask for is a title, which you haven't even written the talk yet. And you're like, okay, well, how about absolute beginner's guides? In my head, I was thinking about like people learning foreign languages. I'm gonna hold on a second there. People like learning a foreign language, and that was something that was kind of like, maybe it's like that, like. You're coming to Habitat, everything feels new and foreign to you, and you're just like, I don't know what's going on. And so to me, I was thinking like, let's just do that. And when I started researching beginner's guides, just to try and think of like the formats for the slides and stuff I was going to do here, you see a lot of where it'll give you a term on one side and a definition on the right, or it might be like the Spanish term and then the English word, and then you kind of make these associations, and that's sort of how you kind of memorize it and learn the basic stuff. So. This is where my adventure in Google Images started. I thought this one was pretty cool. So it's basic, right? Yes, see, no, hello, hola. Like, okay, cool. Like this is going to be the structure of my slides. Like I feel like whoever made this slide must have had some bad experience, because by the end of it, it's pretty interesting. Like, do you serve paella? Yes. How about a large jug of sangria? And then it goes to, I love you, I don't feel so good, and where are the toilets at? So this might be like, the other thing I thought in my head, like the only Spanish I learned as a kid, I swear it's the only Spanish my dad still knows, is Donde es el baño. So maybe this is like chaos habitat or something. I probably just got that wrong too. But that's what we do. So this is kind of the structure of it. We're going to like do some associations here to try and help you build this mental model in your head. Okay, by the end of this presentation, this is totally going to make sense to you. Like, that's habitat right there. We'll just stop. Like, any questions? That's pretty much it. So we're going to go through all these. You're going to see a bunch of this junk, and then at the end, you're going to be like, oh yeah, cool. Like the yoga lady and the platform shoe, that totally makes sense to me. That's habitat. Okay, so we're going to start off like right at the top, and then we're going to kind of break it down, and we'll kind of just go not into the weeds, but just the basics, right? Okay, this is cool. Like whoever wrote this put a lot of time into writing this, and we share it all over the place, and it's accurate. But when you read that, like, okay, application automation enables marketing routines, build, deploy, and manage an application environment, data centers, microservices, and you're just like, oh my God, like, that's cool. What the heck did you just say to me? That was a ton of buzzwords. I never thought I'd use a Bill and Ted reference in a presentation, but like, you never know what's going to happen when you start one of these things. Okay, so what is that? What's another way we can think of it? Okay, all right. This is every time I practice this, I do the same thing. I skipped ahead. So in the early on, Julian Dunn, he's not the product manager now, but he was in Habitat, and we were like, and this was not his bad idea. This was my bad idea. We're thinking like, what's a mascot or some metaphors we can use to help people understand what the heck this thing is? And we already had the name Habitat, so then we're thinking about like nature. Then we start thinking about animals. Thankfully, in the long run, Liz, one of our coworkers, made the awesome habitat. But early on, we had this super terrible idea where, like, okay, there's like bees build honeycombs, and Julian's like, I'm allergic to bees. We cannot do bees. So I thought, okay, well, like, what else is there? How about a beaver? And like, cool, beavers like cut down logs with their teeth and build homes, and like, that's cool. Like, that's an animal that is a specialist, a professional at building habitats. So. We're like, cool, let's do that. And then your next thought goes, cool, we're gonna do the beaver thing. And then you're like, then you think about what the heck a beaver dam looks like, and you're like, I don't really want to tell people we're gonna take your app, we're gonna jam it in this pile of garbage and sticks, and it's gonna be totally portable and cool. Like, I don't know, maybe there's like rooms in there, and like it is awesome. Like, I probably watched too much Bugs Bunny as a kid, but like, that's not the image that we want to give people. So let's get that off the screen, and like, let's move on to the next thing. All right. So when you hear Habitat, we talk a lot about packaging, and early on, like, it was just the packaging part and the supervisor part. We didn't have the build service, and so you think like, okay, cool, like you're gonna put stuff in a box for me, and that's like a simple thing, a first assumption, packaging, Habitat, put stuff in a box, but it's like way more than a box. Boxes are boring, like it's just a cardboard box, but it does more than that. So I like to think of it as this. It's like a head in a jar. And there's going to be lots of heads and jars in this talk. And like, you're just going to have to bear with me. And like, whatever your feelings are for William Shatner, just like set them aside. I don't know, maybe you like him, maybe you don't. But it was the best PNG with a transparent background I could find. But like, why this makes sense though, to me, when I thought about it is, when you package something with Habitat, it's going to get these additional capabilities. And it knows about like, when we say the automation travels with the application, what we're saying is like what it needs to know about like being built and when it runs and like how does it run and life cycle hooks and all the stuff we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Like that stuff is all baked in there for you. So when they say the whole application is in there, that's what we're talking about. Think of it this way. Don't think of the cardboard box with just like a bunch of files in it. Like let's think of it as something that's a little more intelligent. And if you want to get a little bit more weird, you can think about like there's a bunch of heads and they can all talk to each other. Or maybe you can like stick a body on the bottom of that and it's like a platform or something. But like that's closer, I think, to what you're actually getting. All right, so this took forever, it feels like, to finally settle on like what are the how can we just break this down into a few things? Like what do people need to know? What the heck is Habitat when we talk about it? And so you might go to demos and you're getting stuff that is in one of these topics and you go like super deep. But you kind of can't take a step back and just be like, okay, but what is it? Like, what are the major pieces? What are things that like I'm familiar with that this thing does, so I can relate to it? And what we kind of arrived at it's a packaging system for one. It's a build service or a build system also, and it's a process supervisor. So like, you look at that and like, okay, a couple of things I've heard of, maybe the third one, like I've heard similar things to that. And then you probably start thinking like, if I'm going to go use this, like what am I getting, or what do I download, or like what does it look like? And well, that's what these pictures are for. So it's not that. It's more like this. So when I started typing in three-legged, the first thing I got was dog, and then like pictures of three-legged, like nothing is three-legged dogs, but like the pictures don't make for great slide presentations. And then there was like a three-legged dog, yoga pose. Anyway, okay, short of the story is like, think like a stool, right? Three-legged stool. These are the things that we're going to talk about when we get into here, and Habitat covers these three things. All right, the first one is the packaging system. And we're going to just walk through some of like topics. Again, like what we're trying to do is build this model in your head, like what is this thing? So if you walk out of here later, you can have something to refer to. Simply put, like the CLI tool, it is a CLI tool. When you're going to package stuff, when you're going to go into the studio, when you're going to build something, the thing you download, it's a Habitat binary, and this is what it actually looks like. So you've got cool cats and great images and trees and all this stuff on the website, and those are meant to help you kind of understand it. But at the end of the day, when you sit down to actually play with this thing, this is what you're going to see. So like keep that as a frame of reference. All right. You've heard people talk a lot about a Habitat plan. We used to say Habitat plan file. People still might say plan file, but it's actually multiple files, but just a few, like a handful. It's not a sinister plan. That was something that popped in my head. It's not like that. It's also not this giant pile of crap and all these files all over. You don't know what it is. It's just a few files. Like it looks like this. You've got a plan file. It's pretty basic. Like it's a shell. It's written in Bash. Like it tells you the name of it. It tells you the version, who wrote it. The key things in here that you might want to like that you would pick up on are the dependencies. So you see the package dependencies there, or Tomcat and JRE8, you see the build dependencies, and those are important because as we talk about this and how the build system works and the automated builds and the supervisor and all that, like a lot of this is coming from here. Like this is how it knows about what this thing is, and it knows how to like update it and manage it and all those things. So, but it's really just one file. Like there's tons of these out there too, by the way. If you look at core plans, there's loads of them. It's open source. It's another repo under Habitat SH on GitHub. Just look at them, check them out. You also have like configuration files. It's just a TUML file. You can check those out too. It's where you're going to put in like anything you might want to configure or reconfigure when the app is running, but like pretty basic formatted stuff, right? Like kind of plain English looking things. There also would be like, you might have a couple of lifecycle hook files too, but that's it. So when someone says Habitat plan, like don't think of a giant stack of documents, a bunch of thorny code. It's just this. Like it's a plan file, it's a configuration file, and maybe a couple of run hooks, or a couple lifecycle hooks. That's kind of the gist of it. The studio. So this is cool. Like people who start out with Habitat really like this thing, and there's not a lot to it, really, on the surface. You download Habitat. There's a little setup command you can run, but the thing you're going to do a lot is spend time in the studio. And you hear people refer to it as a clean room. It's just like we're going to go build stuff. But it's not like Dexter's Laboratory where like there's chaos and his sister's in there jacking stuff up and maybe monsters come in. Not like that. Think of it more like this. So stuff that you go in there, it's safe, it's super clean. When you build stuff, you know exactly what's going in there. You're not going to get any kind of cruft or other versions of software from your operating system or machine mixed in there, nothing like that. Like you're in a safe spot. You're in this room, in this laboratory where you're going to build your stuff. And again, like what does that literally look like? You type Have Studio Enter, and then you get this different prompt when you're inside there. That's it, right? And it mounts the directory that you started from, so the files like in that directory are available. But like there's nothing going on in here. Even like stuff you used to just using in terminal might not be there, but you just have package install the things you need real quick. All right, core plans. I hinted at this a little bit, and this is important, right? Like when you're building your plan file, and people are talking about dependencies and how we know all the dependencies, and you just tell what the dependencies are. Like a lot of the stuff that you're going to need to build from is in core plan. So if you go out on the Habitat website and you click the builder button at the top and you look inside of there, Or if you go to the GitHub repo where the core plans are, you're going to see loads of stuff, like lots of familiar and unfamiliar software out there. But all of these, they're like, think of it kind of as Legos, right? Building blocks for the thing that you need, for your application. What do I need to run on? Or you could think of it as like heads and jars, because some of these might also be heads and jars too. Like maybe your application needs a couple of heads to run. Like Postgres is like, it's got its own dependencies and things in there too, and its own stuff that it does. And then the other thing I think is funny about it is like, it says President Chow, so this guy's feeding them like they're like fish in an aquarium, and that made me think of like core team members, I guess, what it's do, they feed their heads. So the Lego blocks, let's keep that in mind when you think of core plans. Those are things you need to kind of get this thing all stuffed into your Habitat artifact and ready to roll. There's just a quick picture when you're out in Builder, you can see it. Look at the core origin out there, see all this stuff, poke around. All those things, if you click on them, you can see the plan file for each of those. All right, the second big piece here, the second second leg of the stool is the build system. This is the part that we added. This was new last October. And when people talk about the build system, there's two things. There's two parts to this. There's the build service and there's the depot. So what the heck is the build service? It's a bunch of dudes standing around looking at plan files that are super confused. They have a manual and they might try and build a container for you. It's not like that. It's more like this, right? Like it's gonna automate the building of the stuff you need. So if you have a plan file in your repo and you tell Builder this is where it lives in GitHub, then anytime you make a change, it's gonna look at your plan file, rebuild the artifact, stick it in the depot for you. It's going to export it, publish it, and do all that stuff. That's the build service. And that part right now is public and freely available. and so when you're in there, you can even get you see all the output and everything you want from the build service in there. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. So what's the second half of is the depot, like where you're going to store all your stuff. So the first thing I thought of, oh, this is bad. This is like the metaphor with the beer that didn't go well. I was like, storage units, like, each one of these might be an origin. If you think of like a GitHub or Habitat, we use origins, is where you're going to store all your stuff at. That's where you kind of keep it, where you're going to store it in the depot. Every build you've got, like whether you manually build them and upload them, or whether Builder built them for you, you're going to store them all in here and organize them by your origin, where you can like add team members, very similar to like a GitHub origin. So the problem with this analogy, though, when I looked at this, was like, people put scary stuff in storage units, and it looks like a bunch of crap. And I don't want you to have like that in mind. Like of course, there's always a couple of milk crates in people's storage containers. I don't know why that is, but people always have those. And that might be Barry's printer down there, I think. But think of it more like this, right? Like there's a lot of stuff in the depot. If you go out there, there's hundreds of core plans already, and each of those has versions, and each of those has different releases, and at that level, the release is the Habitat artifact, right? So there's tons of stuff in there. When we announced yesterday that there's an on-prem depot, that's what you're getting. You can get this, stand up, you can store all your stuff, and you're going to be building manually, right, though, because the build service is not an on-prem thing yet, just to be super clear on that. But you get this depot, create your own origins, keep all your stuff inside. You can build manually or use some other tool to do the builds for you, upload stuff. Yeah, so that's the depot. Export formats. Okay, this is a cool one, right? So if maybe you're getting into moving more of your old apps to containers. Maybe you already decided to do that and you're partway down the road. The build system can help you with this. Habitat can help you with this. The build system just it automates it. If you look in the Builder UI out there, again, it's public, free. Just check it out. If you connect one of your plans or a repo to Builder, then you can also add integrations for the different formats you want to export to. So if you want to export to like Docker containers, for example, just go out there, connect your Docker account, good to go. If you want to publish those off to Docker Hub, you can do that as well. So this wouldn't be a tech presentation if I didn't have a picture of containers in it. So there's some shipping containers in case you haven't seen enough of those lately. Or if you're like, I don't care about containers. You don't have to use containers with Habitat if you don't want to. This picture makes me ill to think of all the crap that we've dumped down there. But you don't have to use containers with Habitat, right? It's optional. But it's cool. If that's the thing you want to do, Habitat can help you get there. And from the same artifact, you can export to many formats and many platforms. It doesn't care. You can decide to do that now. You can decide to do that later. Maybe you're dealing with teams who have a bunch of apps and all kinds of different apps, and some have moved and some haven't. Like at least you can get some consistency in how people are building their stuff. You can store it all together, and then when they're ready or when they need to like run it on X platform or this type of container format or Kubernetes or whatever, then you're already halfway there. You're just like, it's literally one command to export something to a Docker container. By publishing, so first half of that was exporting it. You're getting into the format you want, the container. The build service can also export to any platform that you want. This is the ugliest platform shoe I've ever seen, so we won't do that. But this is what you can send it to. So you can, right now, today, this is also in the public build service. If you go out there, you can say, okay, turn this thing into a container, stick it in a container, and then I want you to send it out to Azure, AWS, or Kubernetes. You can do many platforms, lots of platform shoes. These are awesome. It looks like a JCPenney's catalog or something, but yeah, Circle and Toys and this was awesome. Okay, dependency rebuilds. All right, this is probably, if we're getting deep on anything, this is the only one that's maybe slightly deep, but not too bad. So I called attention in the plan file to like where you state what your dependencies are. And why is that important? Why does it matter? Like, this is kind of the part that it might feel a little bit magical in a way. And if you remember, if you were here last year at ChefConf, we talked about like having your packages rebuilt for you when you show up in the morning. Like something got patched and you show up and it's there and it's like ready for you to test it and run it. Like those things, that dependency rebuild situation is this, right? And so there's not a great Google image for dependency rebuild. I don't even know like, how to start with that one. So I did a boring one like this, but I think it probably makes more sense than the other silly. So imagine that's your app in the middle, the yellow spot. And your app has 4 dependencies. Maybe 2 of those inside of that circle are the main 4 dependencies. That, like in the example we saw earlier, there were 4. 2 of them might be build dependencies, and 2 of them might be runtime dependencies. But each of those has its own dependencies too. So when someone says, it says transitive dependencies, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about like, your plan file might only show 4, but if you looked at the big picture, there might be like 30 or 40 pieces of software in here. And some of these might be the same, like maybe many of these things depend on glibc. And so when we talk about dependency rebuilds, like what does that actually mean? Think of it like this. If any dot on there gets rebuilt, then everything connected to it, or like downstream from it, is gonna get rebuilt as well. So if this thing down here gets rebuilt, that means that one's getting rebuilt, that thing's getting rebuilt, so your thing's gonna get rebuilt. And that's basically what dependency rebuilds are. This is like one of the neater features about the build service and the kind of the power it gives you. And this happens today. Like we have people who have packages out there and they come back, haven't been around lately, they look at it like, whoa, I've got like 5 new builds in my thing. And like, I've got new updated software. I didn't even know that I needed to do that. And it's hard to track like, today, like what even all are these things out there? What versions are all of those? Habitat lets you check and know exactly what you're running at any time using supervisor. All right, we're on to the last piece here. The process supervisor, the last leg of the stool. Again, this one, like when you think of it, it's still a CLI tool. It's the same binary. Here I just showed like a snapshot of the help commands for the supervisor. And you see some of the things you can do. Like I can load services, run them, start them, stop them, check status. I can apply new configuration. But again, it's just this tool. There's one binary to download. The service discovery. This is okay. It was getting late at night, and I was like, okay, these probably get weirder. Sorry in advance, but service discovery. Okay, there's the heads thing, right? Like they kind of think of it this way. Like I have these different services that might depend on each other, and when I start up this application, I'm going to say like, hey, you depend on this database service, and on the database service side, I say you depend on this other package. And so when you start starting things up with the supervisor, they're going to sit there and look around. They're going to start like trying to figure out like, is anybody on this ring with me? Is anybody in this group with me who I need to work with or talk to? Or am I like somebody else and I need to be in a group with them? Like we're all the Postgres group over here. Where's the application server out there we need to talk to? And that stuff comes automatic. So I was thinking like, this is a terrible example of speed dating. I have no idea where that came from, but I've never done speed dating on this thing, but whatever. But I'm thinking like, it's like talking to things, trying to figure out like, who am I looking for, who I need to be connected with, who's like me. And this was, okay, like I went way off the rails here. I was thinking of magnets, and then I ended up, this toy sucked as a kid too, but I had like awful. This guy has, I think I found the worst picture of one too, by the way. That haircut is a mess. Okay, but this was better, right, and more appropriate. Chef friends. I think like chef friends. You get out, you connect, you meet your peers. It's more like that, and we use the term peers a lot too in Habitat. But think of it that way. And literally, when you start up your application, your services, you just say if you've got your app running and you've got your service groups out there, and you're starting up a new instance of a thing, you just say go join that group over there. It goes over and finds them. It's in there. It's ready to go. So it's sort of like that, meeting people, finding your peers. Channels. Okay, this is a seemingly small thing, but I think it's a powerful thing as well. And I don't know if this does come up in a lot of the demos you'll see when you like if you've seen other Habitat demos and they get all the terminal windows up there, and then they click a button and then you see things start like slowly ticking up. They're using channels. If you think of it as like a different way to think of it would be like tags. Like I'm tagging these artifacts to say like, you're unstable, you're stable. You can create whatever channels you want using the CLI tool. But basically, if you think about tying those to your different environments, like maybe unstable is your dev environment, you have one for acceptance, QA, production environment might be stable. Like out of the box, you get two. You get unstable and stable. When we build something, we're going to put it in an unstable channel initially, and stable is type production. You can manage these also through the UI. You can do some promotion there, although not all channels yet. The CLI has that capability. Channels on old crusty TV, gosh, it's gross TV. Okay, so what it looks like in the UI. There is a point to showing those images, by the way, because I swear later you're going to think about channels and you think about TV, and like, yeah, I get it. I hope. If you're in the UI, it looks like this, and I sort of cut it off. But over there's these tags. Each artifact, each release has the channel on it. I should stop saying tags, but it looks like tags. It's a channel, so you can promote it to stable right here, like one click, boom. And the supervisor is watching that. So when you start up your services, you tell it like, hey, supervisor, I'm going to start you up, and you can tell it a number of things through flags. Let's do like one command here, and you're going to say, go watch. I want you to watch this channel. And if anything happens in this channel, and one of our dependencies, one of our packages is in that channel, you find an update, then grab it, pull it in, and like, let's update ourselves. So that's what channels do. And like I said, it seems like a small thing, but you could use this to apply tie into other CI/CD systems and stuff. But right now, it's just kind of where just get something working there. This is Liz, my UX peer on the Habitat team, made a load of great diagrams out there. You can see them in the Learn site. I'll touch this later, but they're on the site. Check those out. But this is just showing like when you promote things, what happens. Like maybe I've got several apps running on these different environments, and when I promote a package to a particular channel and it's watching for it, then it's going to find it and pull it right up and automatically update itself. Runtime configuration. Okay. Some of these I was like, I'm not even going to try and find range. But this one I was like, oh, I know what this one is. This is like when you've got two cars driving and like the guy's trying to get from one car to the other car. I thought, I'll surely find that. I couldn't find that. It was the closest I could get was this Tom Cruise stunt double with a wig on landing on this car. But like what I was trying to think of was like the application's actually running and you're telling the supervisor like make a change, and while it's running it does that. It makes a change and it tells the other peers in that group or in that ring that like, hey, you need to change this thing, and it automatically happens. Or it's like, so that's you in the polo shirt right there, and you got this thing running and you're over here changing knobs and switches, right? You're changing configuration. The cool thing is that TOML file I showed you earlier, you get to pick what you want to configure at runtime. It's up to you. It's sort of open-ended. Like you want to change ports, you can do that. If you want to change other things, sure. Like you're making the configuration dynamic so that when it's running, you can tell the supervisor to change that configuration setting. I think this is something that I think is a little bit kind of I don't know if it's a newer concept, but I found it to be kind of not super familiar to people here as we talk to them about Habitat, is that this is an interesting point, an interesting feature where an application developer might now get more involved with like the runtime of this application. So, because now they can think about like, hey, there might be things that I need to change, or like I have a task where I have to periodically update and change this thing. Like now I can put that in a config and I can change it while it's running and talk to it. That's pretty cool. Or operations people might have other things that like rotate things or change settings for security reasons. They can do that as well. And that's what this screenshot here was just trying to show at the top. It's as simple as that. Have config apply, what's the peer group, and then you tell it what your new configuration file is, and then it uploads it, and they kind of gossip it around, and there they go. Health check. So, all right. This is definitely where I was like, I'm not gonna, okay, I tried quickly to search for this, and it was awful. Like, do not ever search medical things in Google Images. Oh my God. Like, you cannot unsee the things you see. Your eyes will burn. And so I was like, I did that for a second, like, oh, this is bad, this is bad, this is really bad, I gotta stop. And so I just did a screenshot of this one. But just, you get this API endpoint, similar to the configuration thing, like, what do you want to report on? What are you like, regardless of what your role is, operations, or you're the application developer, what kind of things do you want to check on? What kind of things do you want to like ask the supervisor, like, hey, how are things looking? You can customize that to spit back the statuses of things that you want, so you can define those. Like, we have like basically like a sort of a structure here for you to use, and it will like, it'll provide you 10 minutes of shit. Okay. It just provides you the sort of the connections to say like, I want to. There's a set of statuses I want to report 0, 1, 2, or 3. You know, if this logic happens, spit back a 1, and then when you talk to the supervisor, you get the 1 back, right, or the 0. As simple as that. So, like, you know, like earlier when we talked about the plan file and the setup, like all this stuff I'm showing you, like as a side note here, is just stuff that comes for free. There's not other stuff you have to necessarily do other than like, what do I want to be able to configure runtime, those kinds of things you can set. But there's not additional things you do to get these features. Like someone in between this session and the last was like, you know, we're already using this ABC other technology. Like, what do I tell my people that they're going to get out of this? I think the supervisors of things, these capabilities, some of them might be available through other tools, but a lot of these aren't. And so this is the cool thing. This is where you're getting the extra stuff that's going to kind of differentiate. The slide is hot. I feel like one of those chicken roaster things, or rotisserie. Okay, so topologies, you got like, there's 2. You can stand alone, or you can do leader follower. I got one cute picture here. And so those are the 2. Again, you're just setting those when you start this thing up. You say, have start this service. I want you to be of this topology and join this group. And there you go. It's going to handle the rest for you. Those things are just available out of the box. Same thing with update strategies. So you can do all at once. I got one Chicago reference in here, like, oh yeah, that was all over the place. This one, like, you know, when he hits them together and boom, everything up, that's one update strategy. So next time you watch Christmas Vacation, you're like, oh yeah, Habitat, I should go check that out. See, this is like subliminal messaging or something. And Bill and Ted, because I'm sure everybody watches Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure all the time. Update strategies. Those are there's all at once. And then there's the rolling one. I think Nell earlier too she didn't use pandemic, but was like talking about infectious diseases and they spread. Like, I guess that sort of like, yeah, it makes sense, but like that's pretty. It's not really what we want to associate ourselves with so much. But anyways, there's a rolling strategy too, right? You can roll out your updates as well, and it's the same thing. So all these, like a lot of these things I'm showing here at the end, like how do you set this stuff up? That's all you do. You just tell it, this is the strategy I want. This is the topology that I want. Join this group, all in the command, and you start up the service and you get all that stuff. Well, I guess there's also a third one here, which is content. Okay, so we're almost done here. This is the last one we're going to do. So I showed you that really gnarly slide at the beginning with all the images on it, and we saw some of those things in here. So now we're going to go through this one more time, and this is like, you know those movies where they try and like brainwash people and they just keep showing them images over and over? It's going to be sort of like that, but not that fast. I think everybody will be okay to watch this. So I'm going to explain. So, all right, I've spent so much time over the past couple of years trying to explain Habitat to people, and they're like, gosh, can I even do that in less than like 30 minutes? I don't know, it's hard. But I think maybe we're at the point now where I'm going to be able to do this in like 30 seconds, right? We're going to go through these images, and you guys are going to totally get Habitat. You're going to think of all these super weird pictures that I put up here. Okay, so there's 3 parts to Habitat. There's the packaging system, the build system, and the process supervisor. You use a plan file to define all the dependencies of your application, the callbacks, the hooks, and all that. It's not a big stack though, it's just a few files. When you go to build your Habitat artifact, you're going to step into the studio, it's safe and clean in here, no junk's going to get in, and you build your artifact, you're good to go. Your artifact then contains everything it needs to run, all the dependencies, all the little blocks and pieces of software that you've got. If you want to use the build service, you can use that to help you export to containers or put your stuff in the depot. You can also manually do that. You can put it in containers if containers are your thing, or if they're not your thing, you don't have to use containers. You can publish to a whole bunch of different platforms, like all these great shoes. When you start it up, it's smart enough to know, like, okay, the service discovery is there. It's going to go around and find its peers and its friends. You can apply configuration. You can, while it's running now, you can check the health status of your application. You can tell it to run in standalone. You can tell it to run in leader follower. You can update all at once. You can use a rolling update, and that's it. Let's have that 30 seconds. Oh, one last thing too. I didn't touch on this before we do that real quick. If you want to go learn more now, right? Because everybody's super excited. Go to the Habitat website. There's loads of stuff out there. If you go to the Learn page, there's 3 short demos on each leg of the stool that you can go through, 15 to 20 minutes. The docs are really great. We're always adding those and trying to refine them. The blog's got, like, if you're looking for use cases and like how it's been used with Kubernetes and Windows and that kind of stuff, go to the blog. There's examples of that. There's other presentations we've done at the conferences linked in there. If you want to join the community, like, we're 3 years into this, but it's still kind of a young community, but it's lively. There's a lot going on. You can get in the forums, get in the Slack, and answer the questions. If maybe like, you're kind of coming in new to Chef, and you don't feel like, man, it's going to be hard for me to get into that open space world. I just want to contribute to an open source project, then try Habitat. But go out there and write a couple of core plans. People are super helpful. We've got a team of like a dozen people are still working on this. They're in the forums, they're in Slack, and they really want to help you out. And all this, again, everything, all that is open source. You can just go to our GitHub account at habitat.sh and see all this stuff. There's several repos in there. Jump in, check it out. There's loads of core plans you can look through. It's probably a good place to start and kind of wrap your head around it. And last thing, I mentioned Liz's diagrams that she created. You can get those through the Learn page or the Docs page. Those are just like big pictures, kind of like how this works with different systems and just kind of an overview of all that. So those are really great places to start too. Cool. Thank you.